want to fend for myself, and I want to build people up for them to fend for themselves. Hey everybody, welcome to a new edition of the Free Like Me podcast. Guests come on, speak their truth, leave their shame, their pain, their burdens behind, and they walk out of here free like me. I'm honored to be able to do this for people, to help them and to help you, the audience. If you find these episodes interesting or helpful, please share them, hit the like button, and hit the subscribe button so we can continue to grow and get great guests. If you're interested in my coaching program, reach out to me through my website, clarkfredericks.com, and we finally have a release date for my book, Scarred. It'll be coming out July 29th of 2025. You can support me in this program simply by heading over to Amazon. It's up on Amazon now for pre-orders. Just head over there and buy a copy, and in July you will be filled with inspiration and hope after reading it. So thank you, everybody. And this week, I have never had a guest come on who was involved in a stalking case. I've had abuse, I've had addiction, I've had suicides, I've had just tragic loss, but never a stalking case. And this week we have Meg. She reached out to me. She told me her story, and I was like, holy mackerel. And I'm telling you right now, you have to stay tuned to the very end because you got to hear what happens at the end of this case. Meg is lucky to be alive. I will just say that. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and let's go meet Meg. Meg, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You, like every other guest, gets in here and gets a little nervous. It's natural.
Yeah.
You and I spoke on the phone, and everything flowed because you're in your comfort zone.
Yes.
And now you're in my comfort zone, and it's just, so welcome, and you'll be fine.
Thank you.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Sussex County in Friedan Township.
So you're a New Jersey native all your life?
Yes, all my life.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
And I mentioned in the intro, your case involves stalking.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to say is the audience has to listen to the very end because holy smokes, what happened at the end of this stalking case is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah. I mean, you got to get down and pray and be like, holy smokes, thanks that I'm still alive, right?
Yes, very grateful every day.
Yeah, crazy. So how did this all begin? Where'd you move to and how did this start?
So I moved over to Paul'n'Skill Lake in Stillwater in 2018. I was, fixing up my house and
So this is 2018.
yeah.
And just so people know, Stillwater is the town next to the town you were raised in, Friedan.
10 minutes
so,
away.
Yeah, a couple miles away.
Yeah.
And you moved into Paul'n'Skill Lake, where I grew up my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So I was living there for a little bit, and then the house next to me was up for rent. So I had, there was a man in his 60s, and he moved into the house. So my very first interaction with him, his name was Bill, and I was splitting firewood in front of my house.
Now, did you buy or were you renting also?
I bought it.
All right, so you bought it. So you're stuck there.
Yes, I am stuck there. Yes.
You're not going anywhere.
Yes, yes.
And then the house next to you goes up for rent.
Yes.
And Bill moves in.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
I wanted to just clarify that.
Yeah,
I hadn't asked you that earlier.
Yeah.
All right. So you're splitting firewood. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm splitting firewood, and, he comes outside and introduces himself to me. I'm like this little older man in his 60s. We exchange names, and I say welcome, and he goes back inside. And then the next day, I remember I was out with my boyfriend at the time, and we came home, and there was an axe leaned up against my front door, like a brand new, heavier, bigger axe than the one I was using. I was like, what the heck is this? And then he immediately came outside, and he was like, oh, hey, Meg, I was watching you split yesterday, and I thought maybe this could be a little more helpful. It might be a little less challenging because it's bigger. And I was kind of like, oh, I can't accept it. He insisted. And I was just like, oh, that was nice. And my boyfriend was like, So he was watching you. I wonder how long he was watching you split wood. And
Right.
he was watching you when you got home to make sure that he could come out and talk to you. And I was like, listen, relax. Like, he's an old, lonely man. Leave it alone. So that was my, looking back on it, I'm like, maybe he was right. But
Now, you're how old at this time?
it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
6 years.
6 years ago.
2018.
30.
So you're around 30?
Yeah.
And this guy's 60.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Around a 60.
Yeah.
Okay. So he meets you the one day, and the very next day he buys you a brand new X.
Yes. Yep. Should have been that.
I mean, you could go either way. Like, all right, it's a nice gesture to help me. You saw me maybe struggle.
Yeah.
Or it could be a little creepy. The guy's
Yes.
buying me an axe right off the bat.
Yes.
All right.
So, a little bit of time passed, and he just kind of started to get a little bit annoying. The way that my backyard is set up, there's kind of a retaining wall, and then his yard stoops down. So I had a fence kind of down where mine stooped down, but no matter what, he could kind of see right over from his deck to where my slider back is. So every time I'd walk outside, he could see me. So it was almost like, I'm going outside with my dogs, this and that, and then he just happens to come outside. It's like, oh, hey, Meg, how you doing? And, it just started to get a little bit annoying after a while. And then,
how about like when you're pulling home after working all day or something?
Yeah, it was at the time.
Just happens to pop out. Like, oh, hey, Meg, how was your day?
Yes. And at the time, like I said, I'm like, oh, this guy's lonely. He's just,
Yeah.
I'm also, especially back then, I will make myself uncomfortable just to not be mean to someone. And that's kind of probably where it started.
Right.
So
not wanting to be short with them or cut them off or and engaging them maybe a little too long.
Exactly. Like, that's always been, I'm better at it now. But that's always been an issue. So I just remember he started calling me Emily. Sometimes he'd be talking to me through the fence and he'd call me Emily. I'm like, what the heck? He's like, I'm sorry. And then,
what do you think that was about?
He gave me a play. He's like, oh, I just wanted you to know I wrote this play on my typewriter. When you get a chance, take a look at it. And it was like, a play. It's weird. I was just like, okay, yeah, sure. I put it on my counter. I never looked at it. I think I put it away somewhere. And then fast forward, my cousin was over. And I think we were like playing beer pong in my backyard or something. And there were little areas in my backyard where you could kind of see through. There's chicken wire. And I just remember he popped his hand through and was like, hey, ladies, like, here, you might need this later or tomorrow. I'm like, what the heck? And it's a bottle of Tylenol. And I was like, this is bizarre. And my cousin is so skeptical of she thinks everyone's going to be on a Dateline episode. And so we go inside and she's like, what the heck is that? Who is that? Why was he watching us? And then I'm talking, I tell her about this play and she's like, give me the play. So I give it to her. And she opens it, and the main character's name is Emily. And she reads about the main character. She's involved with a nonprofit. She loves animals. Like, the father's a conservative. The mother's a sweetheart. Very mirrored to who I am. So she goes into a straight panic, and I'm very kind of like, nah, it's fine. So I never even read through the play.
Did you tell your cousin that he's been calling me Emily?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I told her, yes. And again, like, I know her, so I didn't want to overwhelm her because she started panicking a little bit, but you
didn't want to, like, fast forward to the end of the play to see what happens to Emily?
Yeah. I was just like, let's put it away for another day, and I'm not going to worry about it, because in my head, I'm like, this guy lives next door, I'm just whatever, which might have been stupid, but, and then, a few weeks later, I was, he was a lot. He started, like I said, every time I go outside, he comes outside. And I was sitting waiting for my mom and dad to come over for dinner. And he knocked on my fence. And he would always call me Megan. And he's like, Megan, can I come in your backyard? I've never been in your backyard before. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And he's like, no, it's okay. This is what neighbors do. And I was like, no, my family's coming over. I don't need you to come here. And he's like, no, this is what we're going to do. And he walked around the front of my house, walked in the gate, and walked into my backyard and sat next to me. And I just remember he was like, oh, like, do you like your position at your job? How do you feel about volunteering at that animal shelter? All of this information that I had never shared.
That's what I was just going to say. Had you shared where you work or volunteered? No.
No.
Oh, boy.
And I just remember feeling kind of paralyzed, like how this guy just, violated me in a way. Like I didn't say he could come in my backyard. Why is he here? And then I just looked at him and I said, I need you to leave. Like, I need you to get out. So he was like, okay. And again, he's like, this is what neighbors do. Remember that. This is okay. And I'm like, no, this is not okay.
I mean, are you inside like, I never told this guy?
Yes.
Thinking to yourself,
Panic.
I never told him where I work or
Yeah.
what.
How does he know?
Right.
On LinkedIn, maybe my Facebook, I don't know, but it was just, he looked me up. He looked into it because I never, told him. So yeah, it was a bit alarming. And at the time, my parents came over. I told them as soon as they came, and I think we actually went out to eat instead of staying there because I just felt a little odd. And
what are they saying?
My mom, my parents are my best friends and they're very supportive. So my mom immediately, they didn't like it. They thought it was odd, but it was like, let's just keep an eye on it. But if he comes over again, like, maybe you should call someone. Maybe you should call the police. Maybe you should.
I mean, you could also like, if you want to play devil's advocate, you're a very pretty girl, blonde hair, and you could just say, well, you're a gorgeous young girl, and he probably like, just looked you up on your social media account, because you're so pretty and wanted to see a little more about you.
Yes.
You could to a hair downplay it. It's creepy.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of what I did because, again, like you said, I'm not going anywhere. I live here. So for me, I would just keep telling myself, like, no, it's maybe he's lonely. Maybe he's just, But at the time, my driveway is a shared driveway. So I had these two couples that lived next to me, and they were younger. I was very, very close with them, still close with them. And I told them, I'm just like, listen, I'm having some issues. I don't feel comfortable, this and that. So, a few nights later, I'm sitting outside in the backyard with my one friend, and they text me and they're like, oh, hey, we're having a birthday party. Come on over. So Bill is outside, watching us. And we walk over to their house, and 5 minutes later, he walks over to their house too, and they don't know him at all.
Oh, boy.
So he walks in the backyard. He takes a swig of my friend's beer, and they already knew that I felt uncomfortable. I went inside, and my neighbor was basically like, hey, you can't just walk into somebody's backyard. This is bizarre. I don't know you. They got in some type of altercation, nothing crazy, and they asked him to leave. So the next day, I woke up, I go outside, and he has all these plants on his deck and kind of giving himself privacy. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Now he can't see me. I can't see him.
When he walked over to the neighbor's house, he just picked a random beer up?
Yeah.
And started drinking out of it?
Yeah, it was actually a beer that the other neighbors that live in the house brewed special for my friend's birthday. So he picked up that, and so it was even a bigger deal.
All right, now we're getting to another level.
Don't touch that beer.
No, I mean, there's all signs. Like you want to hope. You hate to like go down that avenue, but it's just one thing after another.
Yes.
Yeah. So he puts all these. So the next day, all these plants are now up on his deck. So you're like, all right, maybe you got the hint.
Yeah, maybe he'll leave me alone because I was very close with the other neighbors. And so, I go to sleep the next day. I wake up at 5 to let the dogs out, and there's a flashlight hanging on my fence with a little envelope that says Meg on it. And I'm like, what the heck is this?
The flashlight, is it on?
It's on.
It's on.
Because it was still dark out. It was 5. And I'm like, what is going on? So I go and I open it, and it's a letter. And, it says, I'm so sorry about the other night. I feel so embarrassed. I just want things to go back to the way they were between us. He was apologizing for his behavior at my neighbor's house, but it was almost a letter that a significant other would give to you after a tiff or something. And I was like, what the heck is going on? So I just remember I instantly called my brother. 5 a.m. I called him, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, I think it's really weird and I think you should report it. So I did. And I went to the state police and I just made a little complaint about it and had them file it so that it was, they had a copy of it. And they asked me if I wanted them to go out. And I said no, because I didn't feel comfortable. I thought if they went to talk to him, it would make things even more awkward and weird. I just felt strange about it.
Right.
But when I was on that phone call with my brother, I said a lot of stuff to him. Like I said, I told him about when he came to my gate and walked in, and I said, there's a woman on the other side of him that's his age. Why isn't he bothering her? Why is he focused on me? And flash forward to the next day, I got another letter, the same thing, the flashlight, the whole thing. And that letter picked apart the entire conversation that I had on the phone with my brother. And it was like, you're probably wondering, why I don't go after someone my own age.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like,
Now, where were you having this conversation with your brother?
in my bedroom.
In your bedroom?
Yeah, which is on the other side of my house.
So then how are you thinking he heard this conversation?
I don't know, but it was so specific. And at first I'm like, maybe this is just a coincidence. And I took a photo of it and I sent it to my brother because obviously he's the one I talked to. And he immediately was like, go to the police right now. And you have them go to his house. And I did. And they told me to get something so I could check for, Wi-Fi signals. And I did. And I didn't
Find a
I
bug?
didn't find anything. But still to this day, I don't know.
Either he was standing right below your window or...
Yes, like it was too exact and it was just very bizarre.
Other stuff besides just, the older lady on the other side,
Yes.
why I don't...
Yes.
And what was his reason why he doesn't associate with people his age?
It was just like, I find you very interesting. I find this, and of course, I'm not looking for a relationship. I was married at one point. It was just this whole explanation. It was a 3-page letter, and it was just like, I don't care. I don't want to talk to you. Why are you?
Right.
And it said on the letter, it said second apology, last and final. And at the very end of the letter, it said, if you don't respond, I'll never bother you again. Which
I'm definitely not responding.
No. So I did go to the police and they did go out to his house. And it wasn't that day, though. It was a few days later. And I just remember I saw them like pull up. And as soon as they left, he took all of his furniture off of his deck and was throwing it. He had potted plants. He was breaking the pots. He put caution tape all over his deck. And then he made a sign and it said, stop harassing me. And he put it facing my house. And then he put black garbage bags over every single window.
Wow.
So I called the police and I was like, hey, I'm super uncomfortable. Is this guy okay? Like, is he going rogue? Should I be, what can I do? And they basically were like, you can't do anything unless he writes your name on that sign or says something directly to you that's threatening. He can break his own stuff and he can do, he can have a hissy fit in his yard if he wants to.
Right.
So, that was the first time that I had ever seen him be aggressive or angry. So that was quite alarming.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. And then.
And you're living there by yourself.
Yeah, yep.
Oy.
And I just remember he left. Like he left and I just didn't see his vehicle or any activity at his house for maybe a week or so.
Let me just interrupt you a second.
Yeah.
I was obviously abused as a kid. And then, I forget, if it was around 89, 90, my grandmother in Florida got, broken into, tied up, tortured, raped, 80 years old, and then murdered. And that just triggered something from my earlier abuse. And every time I would go into an empty house, I would have to go room by room. I just was convinced there was somebody in there, in the bathroom, the shower curtain. That was like
Yeah.
that was the one. I was like, there's gonna be somebody in that shower curtain, behind that shower curtain. I'd be like, "Rawr!"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I couldn't stop myself. Like I had to. Did you are you feeling that and doing that?
Yeah. I got a camera for the back of my house at that time. And yeah, I mean, I've always had dogs. I have 3 now, but I had 2 at the time. And, they're, I relied on them too to just be, reactive to anything. But yeah, I went to go get my concealed carry. I was I started to get very uncomfortable. And when my friends were over and my parents were over and, everyone's having a good time, especially during COVID, it was one thing, but then everybody goes home and then
Right.
I'm by myself.
And then I would, coming home at night, if you went out to a bar or restaurant or something, then coming home, 11, 12 at night, 10 o'clock at night. And
Yeah.
I would think walking into that house, it'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I got to check each room, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then also sometimes I wouldn't because the door, the door had such a distinct sound, his door, when he opened it. And it was like every time that I came home from, even if it was 11 at night, you hear that door open.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I knew that he was at his house when that happened, obviously. But yeah, I was never, I bought my house. It was my sanctuary in the beginning. And then it kind of was just like a prison after a while. So
Right.
yes.
Yeah, I distracted you. So he has his hissy fit, smashes everything.
Yeah.
The cop's saying you're allowed to smash stuff at your house if you
Yes.
want. So
Yep.
where do we go from there?
So he left for a while and then he I guess he finally came back and it was quiet for a little bit. And then I went outside one day and I was doing some kind of craft at my little picnic table. And so my back was facing his deck. My phone's inside, my keys are inside. And I hear him come outside. I'm just like, whatever. So, you can just feel somebody staring at you. Felt it. And, those little bells at hotels or the bank. Yeah. So I'm just sitting there doing my craft. And then I hear like ding, ding, ding. And I'm like, all right, that's weird. And then a few seconds pass and then ding, ding. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's no way in hell that this guy is staring at me ringing a bell because that would be absolutely bizarre. This goes on for 10 minutes, just him staring at me.
And you refuse to turn around.
Yeah, because I kind of, like, at that time when he came in my backyard, like, I felt paralyzed. I'm like, I want to get my phone, I want to get my keys, I want to leave, but then I have to get up and turn around and face him in order to get back inside. So eventually I'm just like, this is insane. So I got up and then I just remember him being like, Megan, just hold on. I just want things to go back to the way they were between us. Like, can you please forgive me? And I turned to him and I was just like, I need you to leave me alone and do not speak to me. I grabbed my keys and then I left. And then I went to the police department again. And, it just was like every time I'm going to the police department, I'm just filling this out and it's going on file. It's going on file. It's going on file. So I guess this was like now getting closer to Christmas time. And I wake up the one morning and there's another flashlight hanging on my my thing. So I look and it's an Amazon package and it's this whole it's an Amazon package and another letter. And the letter it's a poem and everything rhymes, and in it it's basically the gist of it is, what a fortunate mistake that your package ended up at my house because now I have a reason to talk to you. And I don't remember what the wording was. It rhymed, but it was something along the lines of, you may call the police, like, let them come. It's worth it to me. So that was that was pretty brazen to let me know that he doesn't care if the police come. He's still going to do what he's going to do.
Right.
So I went to the police.
So I was going to say, did you answer his wishes?
I sure did. And, I don't know if they called him or they went out there. I didn't really follow up because at this point it was just like every so often I'm just going there and nothing's really happening. I remember he put a sign on his door facing my house and it said, "Come on in and scream." And I thought that was interesting.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
So,
when you're going to the police, what have you gone now? Like half a dozen times?
yes.
Are you ever saying, can we press charges? Or are they
So
saying, do you want to press charges? Or
it was kind of frustrating to me because the state police is a revolving door. Every barracks has, people are getting transferred, this and that. So I think there's 60 people at the barracks that I was going to. And every single time I'm going, I'm getting a different person.
oh, so you never had the
Retelling a
same.
story.
Right,
Oh,
right.
that sounds, like he has a crush on you. He's probably harmless, this and that. And it's like, how many times is it harmless? Like,
Right.
when is it something you guys went and talked to him and he's still writing this letter saying that he doesn't care? So when can we care? And it was brought to my attention that, in the state of New Jersey, you couldn't get a restraining order on somebody unless you were related to them, you dated them, or you lived in the same house as them, or they sexually assaulted you. Those are
Really?
yes.
Wow.
Yes. So I'm just like, okay. So I'll just keep coming here, I guess, and just, hoping that everything is okay. I don't know. So again, like more time passes and there's just little things here and there. Like one day I was feeding the birds and I told my mom this, I was talking about it the other day, the movie It, the clown movie.
Yeah.
I remember watching it when I was way too little to be watching it. And there's just a part, I hate clowns, by the way. There's a part where, the sheets are blowing in the wind and there's nothing there. And then all of a sudden it blows and then he's standing there.
Right.
And I was outside in the backyard, like putting something in my bird feeder. And all of a sudden I turn and he's just standing there very close to my fence. That's chicken wire and is just staring at me completely disheveled in his pajamas. It's like 4:00 in the afternoon. And he just looked at me and he's like, Megan, I'm sorry. Can't you just talk to me? And I just walked inside. I don't know. So I guess it wasn't until 2023. I don't know. My neighbors moved out that were living next to me. So that house was vacant for quite some time. And then I don't know, he just started getting kind of crazier and crazier. And he would do things to get attention from me, no matter what they were, just weird things. Like the one day he put a bunch of 2x4s, leaning them up against my fence. I have like a plastic panel fence down by my crawl space. And I look and it's leaning forward. So it's like, okay, I have to say something to him because,
Right.
What am I supposed to do? So I record it on my phone and I just go over and I just tell him to, do whatever you want on your property, but don't touch mine. And then he, let's just talk. Like, I just want to talk, da, 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 da. And then I make a phone call to my mom about it. And I just was like, I just want privacy. Like, I just want, my fence isn't high enough, this and that. And then I wake up the next day and he's digging a hole in his yard and he puts up, it's so bizarre. He puts these 2x4s in the ground and then he puts lattice up and it's wrapped with the stuff that you put down to block weeds so they don't grow, the black.
The black, yeah.
Yeah.
Paper stuff.
And he has it like up. It's still not privacy because of where he put it, but it's like almost as if he was doing that because he heard me say to my mom that I want something in addition to, what I have existing. Then I call my mom and I tell her how hideous this is. And I'm just like, this is so bizarre. Like, if someone comes to my house, they're going to look next door and be like, what the heck is this? So then the next day I wake up and he put roses, fake roses, stapled them all over. And yeah, so that was, again, it was just like every conversation.
Almost like he heard you say it was ugly. And so I'll put roses on to make it beautiful.
Yes.
And you still don't have any idea how he's like hearing in on these conversations. Maybe he's got some parabolic microphone.
Yeah,
like the cops, like when they're like, looking at drug dealers' houses, they got these mics that can hear everything inside.
I don't know, but it was too many times and too specific. And again, I'll never know, but it was just, yeah, it was. And then I'm just, then I stopped caring. I'm like, I don't care. Like, listen and, hear whatever you want. Completely, what am I supposed to do? So I think it wasn't until maybe April of last year. Same type of situation with the fence, where the chicken wire fence is. I walk outside and he's got all these pallets like up on my retaining wall.
You said April of last year?
April of 2023.
Oh, so this has gone on now for 5
Oh, yeah.
years?
Yeah.
Wow.
And just constant little things here and there. And then sometimes it's like, oh, I go to the police, I make a report, I do this. And then
So over those 5 years, like how many times do you think you went to the state police?
30.
30?
Probably somewhere around there. I felt like I was going there. And then he would take breaks. And then I left out that there was, I think it was a 4-month period, something like that, where I didn't see anything going on at his house. And one of the neighbors down the road told me that he had checked in to a psychiatric hospital. He had some kind of suicide. He shared with someone that, he was going to take his own life or something like that. So he had checked himself in. And I kind of forgot about that. So there was a there was a little bit of time that he wasn't there. I was hoping that he wasn't going to come back, but then he did.
Wow.
But yeah, so
we're 5 years later now. You said April, I think, when you
yes,
started.
yes. So he was putting pallets up against my fence again, and I'm just, when I look back on when I started with all this and how, timid I was and how I like put my phone on and I walked over to him and I said, we've already done this. Get your stuff off my property. If you're like on my property, you're trespassing, get it off. And he's like, you know what, Megan, call your lawyer. Like, I'm tired of you. Just all this stuff. He's smiling. And I'm just like, I just want this guy to go away. Like, just leave me alone. Stay in your house. So I remember I just went into my car and I just sat in my car and I was crying. And my one friend called me and he's like, what's going on? And I told him. And during this time, I really only shared this with, my immediate family knew about it and a couple of my very close friends, but it wasn't something that I was actively telling people because it never ended. And I don't know, I wasn't openly sharing it with everybody. But this particular friend was one that kind of knew. And I just remember he hung up on me and 10 minutes later I heard his giant truck pulling up my driveway and he walked in the backyard and I recorded it as well. And, he yelled at him and he didn't threaten him at all, but he just said, it's done. Like, you're done watching her come in and out of her house. Like, enough is enough. Leave her alone. She wants nothing to do with you. The state police have been to your house this many times, blah, blah, blah. And, so, same thing. He put garbage bags on his house after that happened and then he bailed. So I went to the state police again. And this time one of the officers said so nonchalant, well, why don't you, take him for harassment? I'm like, what? Okay. Like, how do I do that?
We can do that.
Yeah. Like, I had no idea. Why am I hearing this for the first time? So he's like, oh, you just got to go to the court, file, blah, blah, blah. So I do. And it's just like it's a criminal charge. You just write down why you're doing it. So it gets approved. And I remember the woman that was at the court looked at me and she's like, I just want you to know that even if he gets charged with this, she kind of took me to the side and she's like, that's not going to do anything for you. Like, if he wants to still do something, he's still going to do it. He's going to get in trouble for it probably, but he's still going to be able to do it. So I don't want you thinking if this goes through that everything is going to be okay. And although that was very disheartening and crappy, I appreciated her honesty. So I contact Trenton to get my discovery, which is every report that's been made by the police so that I can bring it to court when I meet with the prosecutor and sit down with him. So I send them an email and it just, says my name and information and, what I'm requesting. And I remember the woman coming back and she's like, okay, here's the 3 reports that I have for you. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? 3? Like, I said 30 times, however many times. And I called them and I was just like, what are you talking about? 3 reports. And she's like, I don't know. She's like, maybe they didn't make a report after they came. I'm sure it's in their files, but this is all that we have in our system. So maybe you need to go there and ask them what the heck they're doing.
Right.
So, I'm shaking, I'm all upset, I'm crying when I get off the phone because I'm like, did this never happened now because nobody has, a report about it? Are they going to do anything in court, or is it going to be dismissed because I don't have enough?
So you wanted to go to court showing like 30
Yeah.
30 accounts of going to the police
Yeah.
of what's been going on over these 5 years.
Yeah. And I had, my own little timeline of things, and I had pictures like, of different things, the notes, the letters, like of every time that I
So you're keeping a
went.
journal of all the
I had a
creepiness.
folder, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I remember calling the barracks, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but can you guys at least give me a copy of all the complaints that I made? And the sergeant at the time was just like, yeah, I'll go take a look, comes back on the phone and is like, yeah, we changed our system. We don't have access to any of them. And I'm like, what do you mean? And again, sheer panic. So I'm just like, okay. So I make my own timeline, and I go and I look through every text message that I sent my mom or my brother. Oh, he just did this. And I try to, and I had copies of a lot of those. When I left, they'd give me copies. And then I got a letter from Bill again when he returned back home. So it was an 8-page letter basically pleading for me not to take him to court, and how he'll pack up all of his stuff and leave, and he doesn't want me to feel uncomfortable. And it went from that, and then he made some, fake legal document as if he had a lawyer. And then the last page was kind of threatening my friend that spoke to him, saying that, it gave him anxiety, and he's this little old man and he's innocent, and my friend was verbally assaulting him. And I had already reported that to the police, and there was nothing wrong with what he said, so I wasn't, afraid of that at all. But when I got that 8-page letter, I went straight to the barracks, and I just remember I went in there like a freaking hurricane, and I was like, I just need a piece of paper with your emblem on it. I don't want your help. I don't want to tell my story to anyone else. I just need a document that has your emblem on it that I can take to court. And the trooper that was there was like, are you okay? I was like, I'm fine. I'm done talking to 5 million different people. I'm done telling my story. I just want to be like free of this. I just, and
Over those 30 times of going there, how many different troopers do you think you spoke
30.
to? Really?
Yeah, I really
man, that's insane.
Yeah, and the time frame of it, there's time. So like I said, they're transferring in and out.
Did you ever say, like, when you were on your 10th trooper, like, can I have your card so that I can, just deal with you from here on forward?
There was one trooper that gave me his card, but again, it's not okay, but in their defense, they have so many like domestic disputes and neighborly disputes. So I think it was just, they don't know the history. So I think maybe once somebody gave me their card, but then, you call and then they don't work there anymore, or
they're in Totowa now or something.
Exactly.
Right.
So this specific trooper, I was very spicy, and which is very unlike me. So I ended up kind of just saying, I'm like, listen, I just talked to Trenton. You guys don't even have any of my paperwork. He's like, what do you mean we don't have your paperwork? So he goes in the back and gets all of my paperwork from at least what I did. So it remains that nobody made, only those 3 troopers made reports, but all of my written things that the other sergeant said that he couldn't find, he went in the back and found them. So
okay.
That was good and frustrating at the same time.
Because the sergeants just blow it off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he came out and he just sat with me, and he's like, I don't know what else has happened here, but like, I want to help you. So like, please tell me your story, this and that. And I'm just like, I don't have enough time. And he looked through all, my papers, and he just said, why don't I take you in the back and I can video you talking about the whole thing so that you don't have to write a whole timeline. But I had already written my own timeline. So I actually gave that to him, as well as all the pictures and different things that I had. And he kind of changed my perspective on them a little bit, like that situation, because he, a week would go by and he would follow up with me just to make sure that everything was okay, or that, there wasn't any other incidents happening, and just made me very aware that I could reach out to him directly. And then he also gave me the name of, a detective that I could talk to if he was out. So that was the first time that I had that happen. So that was helpful. And then during the midst of all of this, I guess I had a friend that knew the owners, which I didn't know until a random conversation, knew the owners of the house that Bill was living in. So she reached out to them, and I don't know what happened, but they must have kind of given him a little bit of a nudge to try to get him to leave. So he, I just remember he had this Subaru Outback, and he parked it at the bottom of the driveway, and he moved all of his stuff. Every single thing that he owned, he moved it and put it on the street right in front of the house for sale. And most of the stuff said free, but he stayed out there, I think, for a month. His house is still there. He stayed out there for a month and would just like sit in the trunk and play his guitar and smoke cigarettes and just, I don't know, but Pawnska Lake is not a high traffic area. So you don't have a bunch of people coming through, stopping, wanting to buy your stuff. So it was just a whole bunch of crap there and him. And I just remember he used to sing, I guess, and he would play this CD of himself singing, and he would sing over it live, just like all day long, all night, till like 11 o'clock at night, every night. So that was my every night, hearing this with my windows open.
And how long did that go on?
I don't know, probably over a month for sure. And we had gone to our very first court appearance, which is where he would plead guilty or not guilty. And that's where I met the prosecutor that helped to represent my side, who in all of this was, outside of my family and friends, was the most supportive person in my story. Like, he immediately, not that someone wouldn't believe me, but he was just all in and he wanted to help me. So I just feel like we just kept going to court, and it's like, he's pleading guilty, and now he wants to plead not guilty, and now he wants a public defender, and you know how that works. It's just like adjourned.
Right.
So in the midst of this, he finally leaves, and
Moves. Living next door?
Yes.
Okay.
And I thought that I was going to feel some type of closure or safer, but the people came, and, they were cleaning out his house or whatever. And then they left it open. I don't know if he was smoking inside, but they left the whole house open. So my one neighbor's gone to the side of me. That house is vacant, and I don't have other houses that are directly around me. So I went from being, oh yeah, he's leaving, to just like, well, before I knew that he was there, and now I don't know where he is. So what if he just drives up the driveway and is in that house? And so and it was also a time, it was quiet. Like, I wasn't having many friends over. It was just a very quiet, lonely, and scary time for me. And I remember I had, I always make sure all my bird feeders are empty at night because the bear, and I'm a little meticulous about my front walkway. So, if there's a stick, I move it. And so I went outside at 9 o'clock at night. I emptied my bird feeder, and I went inside. I hung out in the living room for a little bit, and then I went to sleep. And then the next morning, when I went to fill my bird feeder at 6, there was a cigarette right in front of my bay window. And there's no way that it was there the night before. I didn't have a package delivered. There was like, and so I'm, where did it come from?
Right.
And then, I just remember I was walking my dogs, and the neighbor that backed up to his backyard, I had, said hello to him in passing, but he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, Meg, like, I just wanted to talk to you about something." He said, I didn't really know what was going on with Bill. I talked to one of the neighbors. They kind of filled me in a little bit. And he said that him and his girlfriend were sitting outside, and they were watching him for days straight, and he was painting and kind of just like staring at my house and painting and this and that, and obsessed with whatever this painting was. And his girlfriend, they were talking to me, walked over when he wasn't home and kind of tried to like take a photo of it. And he showed it to me. And from my view on Bill's deck, it was just a white board, a white poster board. But from his view, he painted my house. So it was my house and then his painting. And if you zoom in, there's a silhouette in the window.
I mean, you've got to have anxiety. Are you like getting on Xanax or like, like just to calm yourself?
So
Or
I'm,
like, are you drinking more than you should have? Just to try to sleep at night. It had to be nerve wracking every
it
night
was,
going to sleep. Like,
yeah.
Because you fall asleep and somebody kicks your door in and it takes 2 seconds.
Yeah.
At
This point, I had cameras all around my house and I have, I have a handgun and it was next to my bed and I'm just like, all right, if something happens, like this is what's going to happen. Like what else am I supposed to do? But I'm very, rather than like drinking or smoking, like I'm going to go climb a mountain or I'm going to go hiking.
Okay.
I find myself obsessively, walking and doing all this stuff, but I was definitely doing a lot more of it then. And then I had a serious conversation with my mom and I was just like, I think I need to move and I think I need to move out of Sussex County. And, I'm very involved with the community with, I have a few different jobs and it was heartbreaking for me. I have my friends, my family. I don't want to move away from my parents. But I was like, I have to do something. So I booked a trip to Asheville, North Carolina. I had never been. I was on a plane when I was 3. That was it. I had never traveled. And I rented this little cottage and I just went by myself. My parents took me to the airport and it was the most amazing time I've ever had. Like I was climbing mountains. I wasn't looking over my shoulder.
You
Like
could finally
it was
relax.
free.
Yeah, you had to. You
Yes.
had to be like the hair in the back of your neck for years had to be
Yeah.
constantly
Yeah,
like alert,
exactly. So
hyper vigilant.
yes.
Yeah.
I was in my glory. So, and it's like people are like, "Oh, you went on vacation alone?" Like, isn't? And I was like, "No, it was great. I was doing my dishes. I wasn't like, um." And I just remember I came home and I was sitting in a Weiss parking lot. I went shopping the day that I came home, and I just remember bawling my eyes out when I got into my car because I'm like, I don't want to go home. I don't want to be here. I want to leave. Um, so anyway, I talked to my mom a little bit more about moving and stuff, and then we're consistently still going to court. And I remember my prosecutor saying this to me because the goal was to get a no contact order, but I couldn't get a no contact order until there was a harassment charge. So, but I remember him saying to me that even with, and a detective said this to me too, like that even with the no contact order, if he wants to do something, he's still going to do something. So to try to make a positive twist on me having to go to court constantly, he just said to me that at least he has to check in here and we can watch him. And it's not just like, okay, court's over and now there's a piece of paper and, who knows what he's doing. Um, so, and also just in court, he was physically and mentally declining. Every time that I would see him, he said he was living in his car. The security guards at the courthouse, these 2 older guys that were so nice, but they asked if they could escort me and my mom. My mom came with me every time, if they could escort us to and from the vehicle, which they didn't do for anyone else. And it wasn't upon request. It was because of how disheveled he appeared.
Right.
So anyway, we're in court and it sounds bizarre, but my full-time job was like a kind of a getaway for me. And every day on my lunch, I go for these long walks and I'm always in view of everyone. Like I walk right through town. And the reason for that is just because this was going on. So I remember the police saying, if you're going to continue to do that, which I wasn't going to not go for my walk anymore, do it so we can see you. And so I would pass the Newton, I'd pass like 5 Newton cops when I'm walking. And so I'd always start at the same spot. And I remember me and one of my best friends taught me, he's a coworker. We were just starting to take a walk. And I look in the parking lot of a business next to my job. And I'm like, that looks like Bill. And he's like, what? And I was like, that looks like Bill. And he's like, what are you talking about? And I look, and it's Bill. And he's got this weird straw hat that he used to wear. And he's just standing in the parking lot waving at me with a big, like, shitty grin on his face. And I panicked. Like, I'm like, what do I do? And I start freaking out. And Tommy's like, it's okay. It's okay. Let's walk away. Like, it's okay. Like, call the police. So I did. And this wasn't the police that I was previously dealing with, because now I was on a town
in Newton.
Yes.
So you called Newton Police instead of State Police.
Yes.
Oh. I mentioned this to somebody that I was interviewing you, and we're leaving out where you work, and I told the person, where you work, and they're like, oh yeah, I see her walking around town all the time.
Yes.
I'm like,
yes.
Oh yeah, it's just, at her lunch break. Yeah.
Yes. I'm the crazy walking blonde girl. Yeah. Always. But that is something I'm like, I'm not letting this. He's taking away my, my peace. Like, he's not taking away my walk.
Now, where are you at with that harassment charge? Is it still going back? So nothing has happened legally?
No progress.
Okay.
No.
The prosecutor said you need that before you can get a restraining order?
Yeah, it's not a restraining order. It's a no contact order.
But you have to have that harassment first.
Yes.
And that hasn't happened yet?
No. And it was mostly because he kept flipping back and forth. They gave him a public defender. He fired the public defender. Then he won. It was just a lot of BS. So I called the Newton police, and, they come and talk to me, and very supportive, but there isn't much that they can do because there is no contact order. He's at a public place. He could say he's going to the liquor store, he's going here, he's going there, and there's nothing that anybody can do. So the officer that I dealt with was like, I'm just going to park in the parking lot and let him know that there's police presence here. And he's like, I want you to tell me when you're leaving work, and I'm going to make sure that he's not around the surrounding area. I can escort you to your car, whatever. And so that happens. And he was gone by the end of there was no contact between the officer and him.
Are you ever thinking of like just moving into your parents and putting your house on the market? I mean, was that a debate with you?
Yeah, and I'm very strong-minded and stuff, and I was like, I would battle myself all the time because I'm like, my safety is one thing. I worked my butt off to get my house by myself. I worked so much overtime. Like, this is what I wanted for so long. I love my house. Like, I'm not letting this guy take it away from me. But yes, of course. All over the place. I was all over the place. So then, I end up seeing him again. It's a week later, and he's outside. So you
go for your daily walk, and there he is again.
Yeah, and this time I was by myself. And so I called the police again, and they knew a little bit more of the history just based off of me going there, and I had told, some of the other officers there. And this officer was like, I'm going to make contact with him. And, they took a report and whatever, and I guess he went over and basically was like, hey, like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I'm just doing my laundry. And he's like, where do you live? He's like, oh, I live in my car. He's like, okay, like, any particular reason you choose this laundromat at this time? And I guess Bill instantly was like, is this about my neighbor? And he's like, I was asking about your laundry, but yeah, maybe. And I guess he more or less said, you can do your laundry anywhere you want, but based on the fact that you're going to court for harassment, I would recommend you find somewhere else to clean your clothes. So then when we went to court the next time, my prosecutor sat with me, and he's like, I think you need to file a stalking charge, not just harassment. Like, this is stalking. He's like, I think you need 3 counts. He's like, you have more than 3 counts already. Before he started showing up, he's like, let's get that moving, but that's a superior court because it's an indictable charge. So I would have loved if he was the one that was handling it, but he made a phone call and was just like, hey, I have this girl who's going to be filing this charge. Make sure you take a look at it because it's serious, and it needs to be taken seriously. So I go to file the charge, and I actually did one for Stillwater and one for Newton because he said there was enough for the Stillwater one. And within 15 minutes of submitting it, I got a call from the municipal, not the superior, the municipal court clerk. And she said, "Hey, Meg, they just downgraded your case to harassment. So now we're handling it because it's no longer stalking." And I was like, "What do you mean they downgraded it?" And she's like, they downgraded it. I was like, "I gave it 15. How did they even read through my stuff in 15 minutes?" So I know someone that used to work at the Superior Court, and she made a phone call to the person who I guess makes those decisions and was like, "Listen, did you look through all that? Like, there's a lot more. There's probably 10 counts." And the person that downgraded was like, "You should have called me before. I didn't know that you knew her. um, Here's my number. Next time something happens, tell her to call before, and then I'll make sure I look through everything." So that was like a gut punch for
Yeah.
me.
Wow.
That was really something. And then I have three. Now I have three harassment charges. The original one,
And now Stillwater, and now
yeah. So now
the one
there's
that should have been superior for stalking now
yes,
downgraded to harassment.
yes. So court dates up the wazoo every day, whatever. So last November, it was the very beginning of November, and since he was living in his car, he wasn't getting all of these notifications. I don't know who they were sending them to. If they were sending them to the old house, I don't know, but he missed one or two. And so when my mom and I went to court that day, there was a warrant out for him already, so they were going to handcuff him and take him to jail. And I was like, "Please." And whatever it was, the judge gave him a second chance, but it was a different judge than every other time. It was always the same judge, and he was out sick. So it was a different judge, and I remember he was wearing this, not the judge, but Bill was wearing this purple tuxedo, and he had these bright teal sneakers on. His hair was all over the place. He was bald here and then crazy like orange hair, and he was all scruffed up. And I looked at my mom, and her eyes were just like welled up with tears, and she's like, "I can't believe that this is reality, that this is a real thing. This person is a psychopath." And for the first time, the judge made me come up because it was always the prosecutor, and he was in the other room, and he made me come up, and he started asking me a couple questions. And I just remember Bill turned to me and was like, "Megan, can you please tell them that I don't live at that house, so I'm not going to get any of the notices?" And he's just talking to me like we're old friends, just in front of the judge. And the judge immediately tells him not to speak to me, and the prosecutor comes in and he takes over. And I just remember the judge said something about him starting to show up at my work. And that was the first time that anyone actually used the word stalking besides my prosecutor in our own separate room. And he just said, "Do you know what that definition is?" And then he read it to Bill, and Bill said, "I'd rather gouge my eyes out than stalk her or have anything to do with her." And I was like, "Sure thing, bud." That whole experience, I at the end of court, they took him out, and then I just bawled my eyes out in front of everyone, which I'm not a crier. So, but I just couldn't believe that he's that brazen to just talk like that crazy. But my prosecutor recommended that he get a competency evaluation and that he be institutionalized before the next time that we meet, which would have been December, because he was clearly off the rails.
I mean, maybe he had been on meds and stopped taking meds.
Yes, he definitely, I know that he had a drinking problem just from some of the neighbors and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, he looked unwell. He just, even his behavior, just everything he did was
Right.
very alarming. So we left, and then I booked a trip to Colorado immediately. My cousin had moved there. I just needed to get out of there, and she moved there. She loved it. It's a little cold for me, but part of me was like, maybe that's another option for me to go out there. So I booked a trip, and it was for the end of November. And I I had a holiday party at work that I was prepping for, all this stuff to do, but I made sure I took off the day before going to Colorado, just so I'm very last minute, but just so I'd give myself enough time to pack. So I'm supposed to be home and doing that. And then in my head, I'm like, you really should probably go in and get these few last little things done. And for whatever reason, I was like, I'm going to go into work. So I go in and then, I'm unpacking some of the decorations and then my phone goes off and I don't recognize the number. I don't answer it. No big deal. And then it goes off 2 more times and it's the same number. So I answer it and it was a detective and he was in sheer panic and he's just like, Meg, is that you? Are you okay? Where are you? Like, I was like, who is this? He's like, it's detective blah blah blah, like, I just need to make sure that you are okay. There's been an incident. This is my cell phone. I'm not supposed to call you. And I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, someone else is going to call you. And he hung up and I was like, okay. So then the prosecutor calls me 10 minutes later and he's just like, hey, there's been some kind of incident. Are you okay? Like, not the same panic because I guess they had already told him I was okay. I don't know. But he was just like, where are you? I was like, I'm at work. He's like, he told me that there was a suicide attempt. So in my head, I'm like, okay, he took pills or he, did something crazy in his car somewhere. So I'm in my head, I'm just like, okay. He's like, he's being hospitalized. He got flown into Morristown, whatever. And I'm like, okay. So I call my close people, my tribe, and I go home and I get ready for Colorado. What else can I do? And then I think it was at maybe like 4 or 5. I was driving my dogs to drop them off at where they were staying. And, one of my friends called and was like, what's the name of your stalker guy? I'm like, Bill Clem. They're like, something happened. And I don't know if it was
What was the name?
Bill Clem.
Clem?
Clem.
Bill Clem.
They're like, he, there was a fire. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I'm talking to them and then I'm talking to, the prosecutor, the police. I'm talking to all these people and then I find out that I guess he came to my house that day and I wasn't home. So I don't know. It was a Wednesday. So I don't know if he thought, because we had court every other Wednesday, that I was at the courthouse, but he left my house and then he went to the court and went in the parking lot. And then he got out of his vehicle. He doused himself and his vehicle with gasoline and then he lit himself on fire in the parking lot.
Wow.
Yeah. So she's telling me this, I'm getting the real story and I'm just like, holy crap. Like, and I guess he must have told them that he had come to my house. And on my camera, I can't, of course, my driveway camera is off, but I see like state troopers like flying by from the one way, but I didn't see, and I'll never know, like, if he came up my driveway, because that exactly like where that angle would be is if he came from the left. But and for whatever reason, I was at work.
Wow.
So,
So a guy who you go to the police 30 times for, who your stalking charges get downgraded to harassment,
yep.
who just for 5 straight years has just haunted you, to show his level of unstableness, if that's a word, instability. That's what I was trying to say. Unstableness. Hey, we just made up a word today.
I like it.
Yeah. Douses himself with fire and lights himself on fire. I mean, that's like scary stuff.
Yeah, and the prosecutor recommending that he be institutionalized and it just being ignored is wild. Like,
wouldn't the court never approved that?
Never happened.
Nothing happened?
Nothing happened. He was never, he never even got the evaluation done. So,
I mean, this is where like people get, they get frustrated with law enforcement and stuff. Something like this happens. It could have been a totally tragic ending, and just the ball completely dropped.
Yeah. And I mean, even that first officer that called me, that was on the scene, it was just like, and it's like, everyone's like, oh my gosh, thank God Meg's okay. And it's like, not thanks to really anybody here.
Yeah.
So it just had, the way that everything works, it was just, the timing, but he was still alive. So I went to Colorado and I had met up in Denver with one of my oldest friends, and I told him everything. He took me all around Colorado, Estes Park, all these beautiful places. And then I went and met my cousin in Colorado Springs, and so happy that I was just out there in the beautiful mountains away from all of this, because in my head, I'm like, oh, this is going to be on Facebook. This is going to be in the newspaper. This is going to be a huge thing. Everyone's going to talk about it. And I'm like panicking that everyone's going to be like, oh, this is Meg. Like, this is around Meg. And, I kind of distanced myself from my phone altogether when I was out there. And that Friday, my cousin and I went on this huge hike. It's snowing. It's beautiful. And then we sat down at a brewery. I got my blueberry beer and my phone rang, and it was the prosecutor, and he told me that he passed away. And he just said that they have reason to believe that he reached out to me so that when I come home, they have to go through my mail, because they think that just all the letters, that's probably how he would choose to do it. And then I just remember him so supportive. I just remember him saying to me, even though this is so horrible and traumatizing, like, if he went to jail, I'm waiting for him to get out of jail. If he goes here, I get this. I'm waiting for something. He's like, you're free. He's like, you're free. You don't have to worry about this anymore. And I remember wanting to see his body. That I literally wanted to see his dead body, because I'm like, I don't believe it. But yeah, so I came home, and sure enough, he wrote me 2 letters. So the detectives came to my house. They took them. They said that they needed to check them to make sure there wasn't any threats, anthrax, or like anything wild. And 2 days later, they're like, oh, they're everything's okay. Like, no worries. And I'm like, okay, can I have them back? And they're like, well, we don't want, that's pretty emotional. Like, you don't want to do that to yourself. And I'm like, well, this is my call. So
Right.
can I have them back? And the pushback was wild. Like, I thought it was ridiculous, honestly, because it's my closure. So if I want to read them, I
Yeah.
can. If I want to read them in
Yeah.
5 years, like, it's my. So when I finally was like, hey, it's my mail, I didn't sign anything, you guys have to legally give it back to me, right? And then I got like a little aggressive, and I'm like, if I want to freaking read them and light them on fire, and that's my closure, that's my, like, nobody cared when I was going through this. You guys don't get to care now. So they gave me the letters. And in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna wait till I get home. Maybe I'll have my brother read them, and then I can read them with. And I got in the car and I read them immediately. So the first letter, I don't know if he was high or under the influence of something, but it was all over the place, and it was like, he told me that I'm a beautiful human being and I have so much life ahead of me, and he wrote a book about me and wanted me to know that he didn't use my real name in it, so I don't have to worry, but he'll never get to finish the book, and how he spent the last 5 years of his life trying to figure out why I don't want him in mine. And it was like crazy to read, because you're just like, this guy's, he knows he's going to do this, and this is what he's thinking about. And that letter was kind of like, okay, he's messed up. And then the other letter was like, congratulations on your first legal lynching and your first kill. And then it was like, the tables have turned. It's no longer, Meg O'Grady against Bill Clem. It's Meg O'Grady versus God. So blaming me for him
His
taking
death.
his life.
Yeah.
And you might think that I was, obviously that's a lot to read. It's very heavy. Immediately I was angry, because I'm like, this guy has tormented me for this many years, and going out, he wants me to carry this for the rest of my life. And then another part of me was grateful, because I'm like, I'm so happy that this happened to me, because I can logically separate it and just be like, this guy was so sick and he needed so much help. And if this had happened to someone else, they may carry it. No part of me ever felt like it was my fault. And I feel like if it was somebody else that he did that to, they could have carried it differently. So although it was terrible, I was happy that it was me.
I live in that area, and I never saw this in the newspaper. It was never on the news. What happened with that? I mean, that's a major thing, to have a guy douse himself. That's usually when that happens, like in New York City, at a protest or something, it's nationwide news when somebody
Yes.
goes to that extreme and douses himself, and there wasn't a peep about this. Do you think it was squashed for some reason?
I sure do.
Yeah. Just because of their failures?
I
Law
think
enforcement's
so.
failures?
I think it's more of the judicial side than obviously it started with the law enforcement, but I think it's, there's Facebook posts about some fireworks or someone driving too fast in my development. So there were people in court that day. There was someone that had to be transported for hyperventilating to the hospital. And not one of these people told their brother, told their mother, there's nothing. I found one thing on Facebook that it was somebody said, does anyone know about the fire at the Wanted courthouse? And someone wrote, yeah, some guy lit himself on fire. My kid pulled him out. And that was it. And there was like no action. I'm like, how is this? So yeah, I think it's, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but that's pretty, and it's not like, oh, this is a sensitive suicide, let's protect him as a fan. No, this is weird. It's weird that it never, and then for me at first it was like, thank God, no one knows about it, it's this, but then it was like, I'm healing from this, and it never happened. As far as, everyone else knows, there's no obituary for him even. Nothing exists online. You Google it, you can't find anything.
Right.
So that was very hard for me after that initial part to be like, okay, so am I angry? Am I upset? Like I didn't know how to feel about it. So
yeah, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck,
probably a duck.
So they squashed the duck,
Yes.
so that they didn't have egg on their face for downgrading to harassment, from stalking, from just the whole system, sort of dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And it could have been the ending was horrible.
Yeah.
It could have been, more horrible if he took you out and then took himself out.
Yeah. I'll never know if that's what he was going to do, or even if he was going to do that in front of me at my house. We think that he went to the courthouse thinking I was there to do it.
Yeah, maybe that was to lay the guilt, like light himself on fire in front of you.
Yeah, like I see it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people saw it, but it could have went so many different ways.
If somebody else is going through a similar situation, what advice do you have for them? What could have been done different? On the law enforcement end, I'm sure there's a lot that could have been done different.
Yeah, and honestly, I'll answer that question, but I have reached out to law enforcement since then, and they've, asked if I want to come in and go over it to see what they could have done differently, which is a big deal to me. It does matter. But yeah, I would say go with your gut, and if you feel like something's off, like I said earlier, I'm always like, oh, you're making excuses for someone, or maybe he's just, no, maybe it's off. And even, what's the saying, like, stand up for yourself, even if your voice shakes, do that. And nobody is gonna, fight for you. So I would say, if you're going through this, do the timeline, take all the photos, make sure that you have everything, because you can't rely on anybody else to do it. And then in regards to law enforcement and the judicial system and anyone that has a job that has to do with anything like this, dealing with a victim, take that extra 5 minutes, whether you want to get home and watch the football game, or you have something to do, or you're tired. You filling out a piece of paper or reading or listening or whatever can completely change or even save somebody's life. So just,
right.
Take the time.
If somebody, feels that creep factor, instantly start keeping a journal everything.
Yes, go with your gut.
and don't hesitate going to the police.
Yes.
And just make sure they document it all.
Yes. And also, don't be afraid to tell that person that they're making you uncomfortable. I don't think, this person was very mentally ill. I don't think me saying anything would have made a big difference, but it would have, right off the bat, if I said it when I felt it, it might have made some type of difference. But, just.
Well, just like, abuse victims, like I froze when this guy would touch me as a kid.
Yeah.
And you said the same thing, like he's hitting that little bell and you got your back to him and you're frozen. Like you don't even want to turn around. You don't want to walk to your house. And then eventually, you're get your body to move.
Yep.
I mean, it's the same that flight or freeze,
Yeah.
you know, syndrome we all experience. And then just like later on, I broke through that to do what I did to my abuser. You became aggressive, like, you know,
Yeah.
going to the prosecutor, going to the police, you know, you had to get aggressive at some point. So I told the audience, you know, you got to stick till the end because it gets crazy. But yeah, I mean, that's a crazy ending. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's got a, hey, the guy's dead and gone, you
Yes.
know, I mean, that's really the best outcome
Yeah.
when somebody's that unstable.
Yes.
You know, like the other outcome would have been you're dead and then they're dead and gone.
Exactly. Or I just keep, that's the thing with other victims. It's like part of me feels guilty sometimes because I got out and it wasn't because of, you know, going to court or this and that. It just happened. So like, yeah, for other victims, it's almost worse because it just, you know, it keeps happening. But you know, there's different groups. I never did that. Like Daisy, I know, helps with stalking victims. Someone just pointed that out to me recently. Maybe I'll reach out to them. But there are different, I'm very lucky that I have my family and support system. But there are other places that you can go to get help. And yeah, I would definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you want to, you know, you could speak at a Daisy event. I would, you know, you could offer to, you know, like I went to Project Self-Sufficiency and spoke there.
Yeah.
You know, so if you wanted to do that avenue, you know, just to, you know, give support to other women, you know,
Yeah.
that's an option for you. But wow. Thanks, Meg. I'm
Yes.
glad you're still here with us.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank
sharing.
you. Thank
All right.
you.
Wow, everybody, there you have it. Meg with her stalker who lit himself on fire and killed himself. Whew. Could have been a much different ending. So thankfully, Meg's still here with us. And thank you for tuning in and listening each week. Hit that subscribe button and share these, and hit the like button and tell your friends and coworkers about this. See you next week. Bye.